Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear friends. I'm very happy to give this lecture today on the occasion of the 2024 Blue Planet Prize, which I had the pleasure and the honor to receive yesterday on behalf of IPBES, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So today, I will take you on a journey through IPBES. I will tell you a little bit about its history, its achievements, its impact, and also talk a little bit about the values which have presided over our journey. We will be speaking about biodiversity, that is about all life on Earth. And we will also be talking about why biodiversity matters and discuss why it is so critical to people, and in particular what action can be taken in order to reverse the negative trends in biodiversity that we are currently reporting upon. So first, let's go back a little bit and share a little bit of a history about the establishment of IPBES. So if we go back to 1992, the Rio Earth Summit took place and saw the establishment of two conventions, the Climate Change Convention and the Biodiversity Convention. And you can see here that the Climate Change Convention was able to immediately benefit from an organization called IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was producing already at the time some reports on climate change and is now still producing those reports where you see the increase, the progression in climate change, and now also talking about actions to mitigate climate change. Now for biodiversity, it took a little bit longer, 20 years more actually, and it's only in 2012 that an equivalent mechanism involving governments was launched, and that is IPBES, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It was strongly inspired by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was mentioned by Bob Costanza. That was an important stepping stone on the way towards the establishment of IPBES. So, but that was a done deal in 2012. At the time, it was established by 94 governments, including Japan, and the number of members has been increasing over the years. We now have 147, and we aim to reach universal membership, which is close to 200 countries. Those are the members of the United Nations. You see our mission here. It is about strengthening knowledge foundations for better policy through science, for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being and sustainable development. Our offices are hosted by the government of Germany in a city called Bonn, which actually also hosts the Climate Change Convention Secretariat. So a few words about IPBES itself now before we get into its achievements and impact. And so IPBES produces also in response to requests from governments, just like IPCC, some reports on the state of knowledge regarding biodiversity, regarding the contributions that biodiversity provides to people, and also options for responses. And we have a number of principles to guide our journey. We want to be policy relevant and not policy prescriptive. We want to ensure credibility, relevance, and legitimacy. We do this through external review, where we invite other scientists, not those who are involved, to provide their insights into the work that is currently being produced. We also promote inclusivity at many different levels in terms of disciplines, in terms of covering all ecosystems, from terrestrial, through marine, through inland freshwater ecosystems. We also work with different knowledge systems, science, of course, but also indigenous and local knowledge. And in all of the work we do, all of the groups of scientists which we assemble, we also want to be inclusive in terms of gender, in terms of scientists from all regions of the world. And in order to do this, to bring everyone at the same level of understanding and participation, we have an ambitious capacity building program to help us with this. So, very quickly to let you know a little bit about how we work. And so when we talk about an assessment, you have to picture a rather thick book. And this is a critical evaluation of the state of knowledge by selected experts who are going to work with governments and peers in a sequential process to produce the report. And so there are the experts who are going to be selected from the international community are first going to produce chapters which are based on many thousands of scientific publications around the world by the entire world community of scientists. And once they produce those chapters, from those, they are going to come up with a much shorter summary for policy makers. Those are like the one you see here, which is extracted from the invasive alien species assessment, come up with what we call a degree of confidence, which depends on the amount of evidence that has been found and on the level of agreement between the experts. And so we'll say it's well established, or it's established but incomplete, or it's inconclusive. And so we give a sense of how the community feels about the key findings and the gaps in knowledge that remain. So typically, governments are going to approve what we call the scoping report, which is a few pages describing the questions they have to the experts, the number of chapters, it's quite specific, that they would like to see, and for each one of the chapters, a few sentences on what these chapters should contain. So then we have a call for nominations. They are going to, then a group of experts is going to be assembled, is going to work for 3 or 4 years and come up with the report. At the end, we go back to governments at the final plenary of the close to 150 governments, and there is going to be a line-by-line approval of the summary for policymakers. Government really want to be sure that the key findings in the summary for policymakers really reflect the latest level of science and agreement between experts as well. And then there is outreach regarding the key findings. Now, in producing those reports, we also implement an approach to working with indigenous and local knowledge. That is one of the innovations of IPBES. And so typically what happens is that there is going to be a phase at the beginning where indigenous people and local communities are invited to co-define the questions to be addressed in the assessment within the approved scoping report. Then during the production of the report, there will be some dialogues where our experts go in various indigenous people and local communities, and they are going to request to collect comments during the peer review, and those are going to enrich the reports. And at the end, we also go back to the communities where there is a discussion of the key findings, and of course, particularly those that are of relevance to those communities who have been helping produce the assessment. And similarly, while we produce the assessment, we also implement our capacity building program. And one of the most popular part of this capacity building programs is the IPBES Fellowship program, where in each one of our chapters, in addition to the more senior experts, if you will. We also invite early career scientists, several for each one of the chapters, to also take part. We really, by doing this, train the next generation of scientists in becoming IPBES experts, in better understanding this interface between science and policy. Now, what has IPBES achieved? So in a bit more than 10 years, IPBES has been very active. The international community has been very busy, and we have produced a series of 11 reports. Our reports are of different kinds, so we have some reports that focus on a particular theme, such as in 2016, a report on pollinators, pollination, and food production, or in 2023, just last year, the invasive alien species assessment and their control, coordinated by the Office of IPBES located here in Japan. We also have regional assessment. Again, in 2018, there was such a regional assessment for Asia Pacific, also coordinated by IPBES. And then we also have methodological assessments, such as on the multiple values of biodiversity in 2022. And then finally, a global level assessment. We've produced one so far global assessment in 2019, the landmark global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services of IPBES. So I'll say a few words on the findings of the IPBES global assessment. The assessment came out in 2019. It was produced over 3 years. You see here the key experts who were assembled, and together with all of those who were involved, it really was a group of 500 scientists, literally from all parts of the world. They looked at more than 15,000 references. They received 20,000 individual comments, and IPBES has to respond individually to each one of those comments, so they were very busy in doing so. And I'd like to share 8 quick conclusions from this assessment. So really the main conclusion of the IPBES global assessment was that nature is deteriorating at a rate and scale which is unprecedented in human history, and this is due to human activities. So IPBES, for example, said that 75% of the land area has been significantly altered. It also said that 1 million species of plants and animals are threatened with extinction out of an estimated total of about 8 million. And this number really became a little bit symbolic of this assessment and really went viral around the world. And it's still cited almost on a daily basis when people talk about the loss of biodiversity. But secondly, IPBES showed, and again based on the work of the scientific community out there, that this loss of biodiversity, this loss of individuals within populations of species of plants and animals is affecting the capacity of ecosystems to function, and this is damaging a number of contributions that people derive from nature. 14 out of the 18 categories of nature's contributions to people have been declining over the past 50 years. All of those here, the 10 called the regulating contributions, and so this is, for example, the capacity of ecosystems to pollinate our crops, or to control climate warming, or also to regulate air quality or the quantity and quality of fresh water. All of these contributions have been declining over the past 50 years because of the deterioration of our environment. This is also the case for what IPBES calls the non-material contributions. This is the capacity of ecosystems to provide physical, psychological experiences to give us a sense of identity, to give us a sense of place. If the place where we came from is lost, we lose a little bit of ourselves, we lose many of our values, and this is what IPBES calls non-material contributions, and those have also been declining. The only contributions that have been increasing are the material contributions. So in other words, the food production or the energy production continue to increase at the expense of all of the other contributions from nature and functions of our ecosystems. So what to do? Which actions to take? Well, first, it is, of course, important to address the causes of the loss of biodiversity, and IPBES define and rank them per order of importance as 5 direct causes. So the first one on land is land use change, such as deforestation, for example. The second cause on land, and the first in the ocean, is overfishing. The third cause is climate change, which can lead to a migration of species, but when those species can no longer move towards the pole or up in altitude in the mountains, then you can have local extinction. Pollution, number 4, particularly from agriculture, the use of pesticides, the overuse of fertilizers, which pollute our ocean, our rivers, and 5th, invasive alien species. But of course, in order to change, in order to address these direct causes, we need to change what we ourselves do, and those are called the indirect drivers. And so we need to look at our economies, we need to look at the institutions we build, at our governance, and in order to address this, we need to reflect on the values and on the behaviors that connect us to nature. We've been discussing that in the previous discussion, and this is really at the basis of everything. It's our values and our behaviors which dictate our action, which then have an impact and reflect themselves through these direct drivers. So now, in terms of the actions to take, first, it is important to preserve what has not yet been deteriorated. And so the first level of action is to expand and effectively manage protected areas, both on land and at sea. And I'm sure that many of you have heard about the new global biodiversity framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's called the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The convention is currently meeting as we speak. This is COP16, and one of the key targets of this new framework is a request, a target to protect 30% of the area of land and seas by 2030, which is very, very ambitious. And so what is important to keep in mind, among other considerations in order to implement this target, is that they need to be ecologically representative, to contain the species, the types of ecosystems that are rich, that need to be preserved. They need to be well managed, and there is an issue with helping developing countries to properly, to have enough resources to manage their biodiversity. They need to be well connected among themselves, because as a result of climate change, species are going to move, and therefore they need to have the corridors in order to move. But then in order to protect, we also need to protect the 70% remaining part of land. And in order to do this, we need to really place biodiversity at the center of all of our economic sectors. I would like to insist on agriculture, because agriculture is a key factor in the loss of biodiversity. Of course, it competes for biodiversity, for land, but it's also a source of pollution, pesticides, for example. We know how to do better. We know about agroecological practices, but quite often those are not implemented, and the farmers do not receive the kind of support that is necessary to transition to more sustainable practices. The people themselves need to also reflect upon this and move to healthier diets, in particular less animal proteins, in order to also move towards more sustainable practices and reducing food waste. And similarly, in terms of the ocean, we need to rebuild our overfish stocks and to halt harmful subsidies which promote overfishing, among other elements. And then finally, we also, of course, need to modify our economic and financial system and to include also biodiversity consideration at the heart of these systems. I will in particular talk about exploring alternative methods of economic accounting. I think that's a nice transition with the previous talk. Improving our market-based instruments. I'm sure there are here in Japan some certification schemes, and also to look at the entire supply chain models of companies in order to reduce their impact on nature. I will say a very quick word about two reports which IPBES produced during the COVID years. They are workshop reports, so it's a lighter exercise which is not approved by governments by plenary. So IPBES looked at biodiversity and pandemics and found that pandemics emerge from microbes that are found in nature. They can spill over to people when people are brought into close contact with infected animals because of human-driven activities, and that this could happen again. There are many viruses that are circulating, and therefore that we need to really promote this understanding of how pandemics emerge. And in order to do this, we need to really build bridges between many communities which have not until now been working together, the medical community, veterinarian communities, and really the biodiversity community. And we need to look more at the other aspects, in addition to the medical aspects, the environmental context of how disease emerge from the environment, in other words. And that is why biodiversity needs to be included in health policies. Now, the second workshop report is a very important one. It was the first collaboration, and so very symbolically important, between IPBES and IPCC. And there we looked, of course, based on our respective reports on the linkages between biodiversity and climate change. We again recalled all of the many manifestations of the impact of climate change on biodiversity. Also recalled that there are solutions which can benefit to both climate and biodiversity, the nature-based solutions, which need to be promoted. So everything that goes into protecting, restoring, or sustainably managing ecosystem is good, obviously, for biodiversity, but it is also good for climate, but that there are some measures that are taken in order to mitigate climate change, such as massive deployment of bioenergy crops or tree plantations, which can be negative for biodiversity and, in fact, also for food production, and should be discouraged. Perhaps we come back on that in the discussion. Just very quickly on the fact that IPBES has had quite a bit of what we call reach in the press. Our global assessment, for example, received 33,000 media articles during the week that followed its release around the world in more than 160 countries, 50 languages. And something that is very important for us is that it brought the attention of new actors who until then had been very vocal in terms of climate change. And all of a sudden they realize that there is another environmental issue in addition to climate change, which is the loss of biodiversity. So we received at the time tweets from the Pope, from Greta Thunberg, from some actors. Young people started to demonstrate not only against climate change, but also against biodiversity, and they continue to do so now. And then there was a lot of impact. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which I mentioned, is really starts by citing the IPBES Global Assessment, and its entire structure is inspired from the IPBES conceptual framework, and there are targets that speaks to many of the IPBES reports. Perhaps one example, because I'm running out of time, we are quite proud that the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report, following the launch of the IPBES Global Assessment, started to list biodiversity for the first time as one of the top 5 risks to businesses, and has been doing so every year since then, which then has raised the level of awareness of biodiversity within the business and biodiversity community, which is also now starting work regarding biodiversity, just like it has regarding climate change. I have some Japanese examples. Perhaps we discuss that a bit later. So now, what is coming next for IPBES? And so in the month of December, in a couple of months now, we're going to have a plenary. Our governments are going to come. They're going to approve 2 reports, one looking at how to simultaneously reach our sustainable development goals regarding food, water, health, climate change, thanks to nature and not at the expense of nature. And another one, an ambitious report on how to transform the world, in a sense, so we can come back to that perhaps. And then we are also in the business of producing an assessment for the business and biodiversity communities on tools to assess the impact of various types of businesses, as well as understanding how they depend on biodiversity. So it's focusing on methods on how to do that and assessing those methods that currently exist. And we also have begun some work on monitoring assessments, again, on looking at how to really help governments put in place the kind of observing systems, the kind of infrastructure which is needed both in situ on the ground and also via satellite in order to be able to collect the type of data which they need in order to have information on their own biodiversity. So it's very complicated for some developing countries because those are quite complicated infrastructure. So there is a lot of help and capacity building which needs to be done for that. And so in conclusion, well, I hope that in this short amount of time I've been able to give you a good sense of how active the biodiversity community has been, also a sense of the issues that we are confronting. We have been encouraged to see that the level of awareness regarding biodiversity is increasing. However, we still have a lot of work, all of us together, the young generations also, to really try to continue those efforts to reverse these negative trends. And of course, the Blue Planet Prize gives us renewed energy, renewed impetus in order to reach those goals, to really reconnect people with nature. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for the insightful talk, Anne.